about it with Woj in just 1 minute. The most successful coach in Clippers history, which on the surface, I guess, doesn't really mean much when you consider their history. But obviously, he brought them to another level. But the bottom line is he couldn't get them over the hump with PG and Kawhi, who can both bolt at the end of next season. They could both leave. Who could be coming in? As I mentioned, Woj is here in just moments to take us through the process of how everything happened with Doc Rivers. And SportsCenter is brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. You need the best coverage in not just football, but your wireless network too. Straight Talk Wireless gives you the same networks as big carriers for up to half the cost. $45 a month for 25 gigs of high-speed data, then 2G. Savings may vary. See terms and conditions at straighttalk.com.
Coaching change for the Clippers. Doc Rivers is out following the season.
I struggle to figure out who's going to be a better coach that's out there.
I do think T. Lue should get real consideration. He has all of the winning pedigree that you want.
But it wasn't enough for Doc Rivers. Is Ty Lue next? You just heard some voices there, including Jay, who has been promoting that all morning long. This is obviously a super attractive job. There were many, many years and decades where the Clippers job was not seen as one of the best in the league, but things have changed. Let's head right to the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line and welcome in Woj, the NBA's best insider, hands down, and of course, host of the Woj podcast. Adrian, good morning. Can you just sort of take us inside everything that happened that led to the removal of Doc Rivers as the Clippers head coach?
Well, Zubin, once the Clippers lost that 3-1 lead to Denver in the conference semifinals, and the second time in Steve Ballmer's tenure as owner with Doc Rivers as his coach that had happened, Doc was very much on the clock. There were a lot of conversations within the organization over the last, week and a half plus before Ballmer informed Doc of his decision yesterday, and they looked at a lot of changes that may still come down the road. They can't make personnel changes at this time. I think the roster, potentially there's going to be tweaks to it, but I think ultimately Doc was not going to be able to survive with Steve Ballmer losing that series in the manner that they did. This is a win-now team. The expectations were immense this season, and to not even reach the conference finals against the Lakers, who for the last year and a half, 2 years, the Clippers and Lakers have been going kind of back and forth in terms of putting their teams together, competing with each other, competing for a lot of the same free agents and trade targets. Ironically, even when the Lakers job was open a couple years ago, I think Magic Johnson maybe had some interest in Doc Rivers, but at this point for Steve Ballmer, he just was not going to run this back without some dramatic change, and that started with Doc Rivers yesterday.
Woj, what are some potential landing sites for Doc Rivers? Obviously, a lot of teams looking for a head coach. Where do you think the best fit is for him?
Yeah, I communicated a bit with Doc late last night, and he certainly wants to coach again. Now, whether it's going to be with one of these openings now, Philadelphia, New Orleans, are a couple of the jobs that are open. That might on the surface make sense. Houston, another one, a team that's had some recent playoff success. But I think for Doc Rivers, he can be patient. He doesn't have to jump at one of these jobs. And I think for him, he'll be in great demand, whether it's with the group of teams out there now or waiting to see what may come open down the road. But I think Philadelphia has gotten pretty far down the road in their process. Ty Lue is going to be in there to interview today, I'm told. They've interviewed Mike D'Antoni, and that job is really largely down to those two. But certainly the Sixers took note of the fact yesterday that Doc Rivers is now available. But I think for him, there's going to be plenty of opportunities. He doesn't have to jump at any of these, though.
Woj, can I ask you this? What, if at all, conversations did Kawhi have with Steve Ballmer, Jerry West, Franks to talk about the next head coach or removal of Doc Rivers?
I don't know the nature of their conversations, Keyshawn. I don't think you make a decision of this magnitude in the league with players like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, certainly without at least getting their input on the season, where they thought things were. But But I would tell you ultimately this was Steve Ballmer. He made this decision. Owners can listen to players all they want. Players can have opinions. But in the end, it's on the owner when a decision is made. I think it was made largely at the ownership level. And, again, listen, they could potentially lose both players in free agency after next year. But, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, the Clippers certainly moved heaven and earth to get both of them there. They're both Southern California natives. It's hard to imagine that there's another destination that either or both of them, would want to move on to. But in this NBA, you certainly never know. But I think, for Steve Ballmer, he just wasn't going to just run it back with this same group. I think you'll see some of the pieces around Kawhi Leonard, Paul George. I think you'll see some tweaks to those two.
Can I ask you this question? Much like in the NFL, when there's a vacancy and there's a rich owner that really wants to win badly, they will do anything to poach a head coach. Is there anybody on anybody's bench that's out there that you think Steve Ballmer would go and give a handsome ransom to grab?
I think there's a couple of those coaches. I just don't think you'd certainly have to have an organization that would be willing to part with them. And hey, that's how the Clippers got Doc Rivers over 7 years ago. They cut a deal with Boston, gave them a draft pick to do it. Boston was also headed toward a rebuild. Doc Rivers was ready to move on from that. Obviously, the Celtics brought in Brad Stevens. But I think largely for this coaching search, I think it starts right down the bench, right next to Doc Rivers, and that's Ty Lue. I think he's going to get a significant look for this job. He really impressed people. He had relationships in that organization. Lawrence Frank, their president, Mike Winger, the GM, Jerry West, who's a consultant, has always been a big Ty Lue advocate. But I think Lue's championship pedigree, winning a title in Cleveland, going to the finals multiple times, and I think I don't know that the job is his, but I think he's at the front of the line right now. He's going to have a great opportunity, and he's got some other options. Philadelphia, New Orleans, he's in the mix for all of those spots.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, all those options just show how coveted he is. Jay has been saying the same thing as Woj has. It feels like Ty Lue is in the pole position, and his ability to manage successfully the biggest superstars in the game in Cleveland certainly would get the attention of those two superstars in Los Angeles. Woj, you can always hear him on the Woj podcast, best basketball podcast out there. Love downloading it myself. Woj, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Woj.
So there you have it, Jay. He essentially confirming what you essentially have been saying the whole time, that there seems to be just one coach here in the driver's seat for what is now a very coveted position.
Look, you what is it? The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Right, yes.
Right? Like
right.
that's Ty Lue.
Yep, keep him close.
Yeah, exactly. Keep him very close. The fact that he has been around LeBron James, they know how to win. He's won championships with that team. He knows how to manage personalities. I still will then say that you're still missing something, though. And Woj alluded to it. I would not be shocked to see the Clippers try to find some way to get CP3 back in a Clippers uniform. Wow. He is the bona fide pit bull leader that will help them. And Kawhi is a very talented, extremely talented player, one of the best we have in the NBA. But there is not a player in that team that has the leadership capabilities like CP3 will bring to that organization.
Key's like, man, the Lakers can't get him once, and the Clippers going to get him
twice. They can
twice.
have him. They going to go home anyway. Go to break, Z.
Keyshawn, J. Will Zubin, presented by Progressive Insurance, protecting your business with specialized coverages.
Action on this news. Let's go to Stephen A. Smith. Stephen, what do you make of this news? Doc Rivers out with the...
Well, it's incredibly unfortunate, first of all. You understand to some degree why he's gone, because when you've been coaching a team for 7 years and you haven't been to a conference finals, that's problematic. We understand that. But in this particular instance, when you consider the fact that he's one of the elite coaches in the game, when you consider the fact that they were coaching in a bubble, you had a team, you were coaching a team that basically voted not to be there, which means they didn't want to participate. You had guys like Montrezl Harrell missing about 33 days, Patrick Beverley missing about 18 days, numerous other players missing a slew of days. because they were either injured or there were other things that were going on that prevented them from performing, you really, really didn't have a chance. And then when you consider what transpired in games 6 and 7, when in terms of high percentage shots and things of that nature, they were getting them and guys were just missing. Then you have a leader in Kawhi Leonard, the superstar that you acquired in the offseason, along with Paul George, two individuals that probably would not have come there had it not been for Doc Rivers being the head coach of the franchise, and they don't show up in the game 7. Then it's one of those situations, particularly when you're looking at Kawhi, who is as indifferent as they come in terms of his personality. He's going to work hard. He's going to go on the court. He's going to perform. He's never going to cheat you with effort. But in the end, can you be that leader that galvanizes troops? That was never Kawhi Leonard's MO. So all of those things being stacked against Doc Rivers, what I'm saying is that if he's going to lose his job, you know what, it would have been far more understandable had there never been an interrupted season and he lost under those conditions. But considering the fact that the season was interrupted and then you had guys, the Clippers and the Lakers were the only two teams that voted not to participate in the bubble and not to play, then they came back and played. And unlike the Lakers, you had guys missing games all over the place. For him to lose his job under those conditions are incredibly unfortunate for a coach of his stature. I don't like it at all.
And as you mentioned, this is a team with a couple of big superstars, a lot of good players that come off the bench, a team that I think a lot of coaches would love to coach. So who do you expect the Clippers to now pursue to take over for Doc Rivers?
I have no idea whatsoever because I had no idea. I mean, I suspected that Doc Rivers would probably lose his job because you heard the whispers and what have you. And you imagine all the guys that'll be out there clamoring for this opportunity. And I haven't spoken to Steve Ballmer about this, the billionaire owner for the Los Angeles Clippers as of yet, nor anybody within the Clippers organization, because this just came down. And obviously I wasn't working until I just heard the news. But in the end, I will tell you that any coach out there would want this job. Because Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, regardless of how they didn't show up in Game 7, the bottom line is they're stars in this league. And if you consider the plethora of other players that they have on this roster, you might be in need of a quintessential point guard, a literal floor general who can distribute the basketball and stuff like that. But outside of that, all the pieces are there. If they're highly motivated and focused and they want to play, they can beat anybody. Even though it didn't happen, they could still come back. My proposition was that they all come back this season, next season rather. Come back and show what you got and give it to them. And that's what you should do because they'll be more motivated than ever before. But that didn't happen, and now Doc Rivers is going to be on the open market. And teams, for example, like the Philadelphia 76ers, I don't know whether they're going to call him or not. I know this much. They damn well had better call him because as recently as 48 hours ago, it was about Mike D'Antoni, the former coach of the Rockets and the Lakers and the Knicks and the Phoenix Suns. Okay, that guy was a leading candidate for a job. And, of course, Ty Lue. Unless you're going to get Ty Lue or whatever, I don't see how you're the Philadelphia 76ers and you could think about Mike D'Antoni over a Doc Rivers. That better not happen. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, exactly. Going off of that, there's a handful of teams that are looking for a head coach. Where do you think the best fit for Doc Rivers to go to a place could be?
Philly.
Philly. That's the team.
You know, you see a lot of teams still looking for a coach, but definitely Philly. You got a star in Joel Embiid who should have his behind down in the post doing damage, and he should be the second best player definitively on a night-in, night-out basis, rivaling the Greek Freak. You got a guy in Ben Simmons that Doc Rivers would know how to utilize because he can't shoot. Maybe he'll eventually get some kind of a shot, but he has every single thing else in his arsenal to be a prolific perennial all-star for years to come. It would have been nice if they still had Jimmy Butler and J.J. Redick, but guess what? You don't. But you have Tobias Harris, and you have a few other pieces that you could do something with. With the right coaching, the right motivation, a new fresh start, a new voice. The bottom line is, guess what? You can legitimately, almost instantly compete for an Eastern Conference crown. That's what this will come down to as far as I'm concerned. If I was speaking to Doc Rivers, and I haven't spoken to him yet, but I damn well intend to, my thoughts to him would be, go for the Philly job. The Philadelphia 76ers, if you're listening, because as you know, I worked in Philadelphia for 17 years. I know these people. The Philadelphia 76ers, because I know you listening. It damn well better not be Mike D'Antoni ahead of Doc Rivers. Let Mike D'Antoni go to Indiana and coach the Pacers. It better be Doc Rivers over Mike D'Antoni. I can tell you that much. They should be calling Doc Rivers now.
All right. Stephen A. Smith saying Doc goes to Philly. Doc Rivers out with the Clippers after 7 seasons. Thanks so much for your time, Stephen A. I appreciate it.
beyond the Western Conference semifinals, including this year when Rivers and the superstar pairing of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George blew that 3-1 lead to the